Hi everyone, welcome again to Bake Your Way Kitchen. On today's video we are going to be doing a rosemary herb cookie, and it's a rosemary herb butter cookie. Now you could actually use a different herb if you don't have rosemary, or if you prefer to use a different one. Totally fine, you can just use the equivalent amounts. This is so simple, and it really requires very few ingredients. It's very quick to make, and you can double, triple, or quadruple this recipe. Now this can actually be made into a log cookie. So what's going to happen is when we make the dough, it's going to need to chill for a little bit. But if you are planning to serve this as kind of for a big celebration or something, I usually like to make them into log cookies, so they're easy to chop right away. But you could actually, at the same time, I've done it both ways. You could actually just roll it traditionally in the ball shape that you would normally, or just create mounds with a cookie scoop. So it's totally versatile in that sense, which is so fantastic. So the first thing we want to do, the other thing I forgot to mention, this is an eggless cookie, so very nice. Sometimes nice because eggs are something that we commonly run out of, and I know eggs are now super expensive. The price of eggs are increasing ridiculously. So the first thing you want to do is take about half a tablespoon of flax seeds, and you're going to put it in 1.5 tablespoons of water. Now, if you are double, tripling, or quadrupling this recipe, just bear in mind that the liquid to seed ratio is 3:1. So just bear that in mind. Now I'm actually going to take a utensil here. Could be anything. This is just a measuring scoop. And I'm just going to stir in these flax seeds. And I'm just going to let this set for a bit, because the flax seeds are going to absorb a lot of the liquid, and it's kind of going to act for the egg that we are missing here. So now for the rest of the ingredients. Super simple. I've got most of my dry ingredients here. I've got 1 cup, 1¼ cups I should say, sorry. That's about 165 grams of all-purpose flour. I've got 1/4 teaspoon of white pepper. Now this is going to really give this cookie a kick. It's kind of, to describe this cookie, it's kind of a bridge in between a savory and a sweet cookie, because we are sweetening this cookie a little bit, not as much as a traditional sweet cookie. But with the herbs and with the white pepper, we're really giving this a bit of a savory flavor. We've also got 1/4 teaspoon of baking soda and a pinch of salt. Now, if you use salted butter here, definitely leave out that salt, because there's enough going on here with the baking soda. That'll do the trick. You could, if you want, try out the batter, and if you feel like it could use a little bit, like a touch, like 1/8 teaspoon, go by that. Bear in mind, you can always add to a recipe, you can never subtract, or not usually at least, in baking. Baking can be a little unforgiving that way. So with these dry ingredients, you just want to whisk them together. I've also got my rosemary. I'm using dried rosemary, and we're just going to mix this in. It's about 1.5 teaspoons of dried rosemary, which I chopped. Now keep in mind, if you're chopping rosemary, it can be a little difficult, so make sure it's kind of in a contained area, or if you have one of those spice crushers, you should use one of those. Or another option is to put the spice in a Ziploc lunch bag or something, and kind of hammer it down that way to break it down, because you will want to break it down, because we want those spices to be kind of mixed throughout our batter here. So now for our wet ingredients, which are very few, as you can see. I've got, well actually before I get to that, I've got the butter here, which is 1/2 cup, 113 grams. This is unsalted, and this is room temperature. Like, there's no liquid at the bottom here. I didn't cheat this time. Usually when I say room temperature, you may have noticed in prior videos, sometimes I have a little bit of the butter liquid, and that's because I put it in the microwave for a few seconds too long, and I was in a hurry. So the first thing you kind of want to do is with either, and you could do this part with an electric mixer if you have a handheld mixer or a stand mixer. I just feel this is such a small recipe, I'm not even going to bother. So I'm just going to continue to patiently add this, or mix this in. I'm going to, with the help of my spatula, just get this butter beat before we add in our sweetener and our vanilla and our flax seeds, and then we'll add in our dry ingredients in stages. This recipe is so simple. So after you beat the butter for about a minute, we're going to add in about a 1/4 cup of honey, which works out to about 60 grams. And this is a liquid honey. Now, as I've mentioned before, anytime you're using something as messy as honey, you want to grease the bowl that you are putting your honey in, like as you're prepping for this recipe. And while you're at this, while you're about to pour in the honey, you can preheat your oven at this point. And the honey really complements this well. You want to beat this in, and we're going to add in a touch of vanilla. Not a whole lot, because again, this is kind of a bridge between a sweet and a savory, so we want to limit it, but at the same time, we're not sweetening this too much, so the vanilla kind of complements well. This is kind of a cookie you pretty much could serve, I mean, ideally you serve it at, after dinner as kind of a very light dessert, but you could also, as a bit of a sweeter appetizer, you could definitely do that. So I've beaten my honey into the butter. We got honey butter now. And there's a little bit of that vanilla, and I can smell that vanilla just a little bit, but you know me, I go crazy over vanilla. Like, I definitely held myself back here. So now we're going to add in our chia seeds, and you can see that the chia seeds have soaked up most of the liquid here, but it's going to really help to bind our ingredients together. So we're just going to mix this in. And I can tell, like, I can just tell as I mix it, because I've beat eggs into butter mixtures many a times, so I can definitely tell when something looks right and when it doesn't. And this looks exactly as it should. And it smells very good, I must say. Again, I want to stress this is going to be a smaller portion cookie recipe, because this recipe it's a savory cookie, and it's usually something you serve on a special occasion. So you could double or triple this though if you're having a lot of people over. So now we're going to fold in our dry ingredients carefully. You want to make sure we're doing this carefully. We're not trying to overmix this at all. Just be gentle. And you'll see it starts to come together. It shouldn't be, when you're mixing it, it should easily start to fold together. And it should be very crumbly. Like, it shouldn't be, your hand shouldn't be messy to the touch. When you touch it, like, my hands aren't sticky with the wet ingredients. So you can tell that it's at least got sufficient amount of flour. Now, if it doesn't have enough, if it has too much flour, it'll be way too crumbly to even mold into any shape. And in that event, if that ever happens, you need to add a little bit of liquid. So maybe start with a teaspoon or two at a time. But we're not. This is exactly what we need. I can tell that this is going to be good. And what we're going to try to do now, this needs to chill, but we also need to, so we're going to be putting it in a sheet of plastic wrap. So I'm going to grab a sheet of plastic, and we're going to mound this and seal it up, and then put it in the fridge. Okay, I got my sheet of plastic wrap here. And again, as you can see, this is a very small recipe, and so quick and easy to put together. we're good. Now I thought I would just give it a small try, just for you to get my impressions in case I don't get to at the end of the video. So I'll just take a little bit here. Man, this is fantastic. And I gotta say, I know I'm gonna get the question asked, can I use sugar instead of honey, or can I sweeten another way? You can do it the way you want, but just bear in mind, especially if you're using a granulated sugar over a liquid syrup like a maple syrup and honey, which where the dry ingredient amounts can be around the same. If you're using your granulated sugar, you might want to hold back a little bit on the flour. But I gotta say, that honey and rosemary together just works wonders. And it's a never fail. It's a never fails every time. It always impresses people whenever you serve it. So what you want to do at this point, because you should notice there's still a little bit of flour there, but it's not too bad. It should have all kind of melted together. So just with your hands, just kind of absorb. Make sure that the flour kind of absorbs into it. We're just going to put it on here, and there we go. And you can kind of just from here kind of mound it into a ball shape. And if you're making these into kind of a log type cookie, you can kind of form it into a log, like so. And you can see it really starts to mold together. If this had too much flour, we wouldn't be able to shape this at all. And, but anyway, so what I like to do is just do that. It doesn't need to be perfect. But this needs to go into the fridge. Oops, this on here. Sorry about that. There, kind of fold it like that, like so. That's kind of how you do it. You kind of want to spread out a sheet, put it in the middle, spread it out, kind of line in both sides, and then from both ends. So make sure that you have a bit of give on each side so that you can work with it. So this needs to go into the fridge for about an hour. About 10 or 15 minutes, or maybe about 10 minutes before you take them out of the fridge, you're going to want to preheat your oven to 350 degrees Fahrenheit, 180 degrees Celsius. I did want to stress, you could make this the day before, a few days before, and serve it right away, or bake them off on demand. Totally fine. These will last for a long time. I'm going to put this in, and then we will cut them into and put them in the fridge, or cut them in the oven. I had this in the fridge overnight. It's actually best, ideally, if you can, because it really firms up. But again, as I mentioned, after 1 hour is sufficient. And I did actually the night before, just to see how they were, I trimmed off the edges and baked a few off already, and they tasted very, very good. Very, very nice. So now what we do is simply, just simply with a knife, and you have your parchment paper, have your oven preheated. We're going to cut these and then put them on our cookie sheet and then bake them for about 10 minutes. We're looking for it to be kind of a nice light brown color. And you want to cut them about, that one's kind of falling apart a little bit. But you want to cut them about 1/4 inch, or 1/2 inch. It's up to you, but you really want to make sure they're not too thick. And you want to make sure that you put the thinner ones in the center, because the thicker you want to make sure that you put the thinner ones, in the center, just so that everything bakes evenly if you've got some that are slightly thicker. So I'm just going to continue to do this, and then we'll add them on here. This will make, depending on how thick you cut them, about 24, 36. And you just simply, it's as simple as this. And so the longer you put it in the fridge, the easier it is to cut them in this form. If it's if it's still very tender, very soft, you'll have to roll the cookies. They're now all sliced, and you can see they're now on the cookie sheet, and this is about 25 here. I had about 3 or 4 extras that couldn't fit on here. I like to give them a bit of space, even though it's not really good. They're not really going to be spreading too much, but I always like to leave a little bit of room. So I had about 4 or 5 extra, and then last night there were 4 or 5 from the edges. So in total I yielded about 33, 34. But some of these I cut a little bit thicker. So this is going to go into the oven, as I mentioned, for about 10, 12 minutes. Really depends on the oven. You're looking for it to just a nice light brown color. That's kind of a good indicator you're ready. You want to make sure oven is at center rack, 350 Fahrenheit, 180 degrees Celsius. If you're using a fan oven, you might want to dial it down a little, maybe to 340, 170, 160, just simply because those ovens tend to bake quicker, and it might brown the edges too quickly. But just something to bear in mind, but you know your oven better than me. So I'm going to put these in, and I'll show you what they look like once they're done. These are now done. They didn't even take 10 minutes in my oven. Sometimes I think this oven just bakes super quick. We have a small oven, and then we have a larger oven, and the small oven really makes things really fast. But you can tell nice light brown edges, and they almost look a bit like one of those cheddar shortbread biscuits. It smells incredible. You can see the oregano, you can see, I keep saying oregano. You can see the rosemary, and you can see some of the chia seeds, which were used to bind kind of our wet ingredients. It smells, I gotta tell you, it smells so nice. It smells like rosemary, it smells like butter. So again, you want to use, if you have fresh rosemary, I'm going to have on bakeyourway.com the equivalent of what to use if you're not using dried rosemary. If you're using the real deal fresh rosemary, that'll be on the site. And also, I would just recommend getting a good quality butter, because this is a butter cookie, essentially, with a savory and sweet flavor to it. So you want to make sure that butter flavor is really going to come through, so make sure it's a good butter. So I thought I would give this one a try. They're still very soft. I thought I would give this one a try because it seemed to be the most out of place. It was the smallest one, I think, out of all of these. It's not very sweet. So that's why I stress to you, you could serve this before or after even. It's one of those weird kind of treats that could either be served before as a savory or as a very very light sweet, because it's not very sweet. We only used about a quarter cup of honey, and you can't taste the honey at all. It just sweetens it ever so slightly. It just is a perfect balance. I don't think you can go wrong with this. The pepper kind of gives it a bit of a kick. I just think it's a phenomenal cookie. I think it's great to serve at a special party. I would say before, maybe with some other savory items, some cheeses even could work. These can store in an airtight container for several days, although ideally with these types of cookies you should serve it as soon as possible. So I would say within a few minutes. And that's about it. So you can store these in an airtight container. You could keep them in the fridge, but I usually just always keep them at room temperature. You can store them either way. I hope you visit bakeyourway.com for more. Thanks so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.